Today we're talking about the burrowing tunnelling creation that is the Terrax Termite assault drill, and talking about a few potential uses with Marines, AdMech and Chaos. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, the strategy focused 40k channel where we're all about getting the most out of our miniatures on the tabletop. In today's video we're reviewing the Forge World Terrax assault drill. Really quite an interesting transport option both for the AdMech and Chaos, and can be very competitive. In the video we'll take a look over its datasheet, talk about potential units to transport, and how I'd use the Terrax drill in game. In the background, the Terrax assault drill is a very specialised transport vehicle, frequently deployed by the adeptus mechanicus, and somewhat less frequently by the Space Marine legions in the Horus Heresy and the Traitor legions. The drill uses a phase field generator to burrow through the ground, backed up by fearsome mechanical drills, and frequently squadrons of these are deployed behind each other to use the same tunnel. A squadron will often emerge from the depths below perfectly in sync to give the enemy no prior warning until it's already too late. It has notably seen use in the Imperial Fist Legion in the Horus Heresy. At one time their entire first company was mounted on these drills to assault a traitor stronghold. Appearing behind enemy lines allow them to cause maximal disruption and win the battle. Once on the surface, the Terrax can still be used as a weapon of war, often driven into enemy vehicles or fortifications to destroy them with that massive mining equipment. Certainly sounds like a unique way to get to the field of battle, so let's see what it can do in game. So here we have the datasheet for the Terrax pattern Termite assault drill. It's a dedicated transport, and it can be fielded by the forces of the Space Marines, Adeptus Mechanicus, or Chaos Space Marines. It does include their various different sub-chapters and legions, such as Death Guard and Thousand Suns, and Death Watch, Blood Angels, Dark Angels, and Space Wolves. When it's equipped with Storm Bolters, it'll cost you 136 points, so no small investment for a transport vehicle, but it is fairly durable to enemy attacks. When not bracketed, it has a movement of 8, weapon skill 4, ballistic skill 3, strength 7, toughness 8, 10 wounds, 6 attacks, leadership 8, and a 3+ save. Overall really quite respectable for just a drill. Frankly fairly surprising just how well it can shoot, and toughness 8 and 10 wounds does make it reasonably tough. And generally the main reason that you get one of these as a transport is that it can transport a squad of 12 of your infantry in essentially deep strike reserve and have them turn up halfway through the game. Perhaps for that reason I think it's just a little bit less useful for Marines, who already have a very good option for this in the drop pod, though it still has some uses in being a bit more of a threatening transport once it's down. The rules are that it sets up 9 inches away when it comes out of reserve, and then if it wants to, the unit inside can immediately disembark, though it will of course have to be within 3 inches of the outside of the drill, which could potentially make positioning a little bit tricky with a large unit, if you wanted to make sure that the squad inside was getting out with 12-inch range for example. In terms of range damage output, the drill can actually do a decent amount itself. It's got a melter cutter, which is essentially an assault D3 melter gun, strength 8, AP-4, damage D6, and it has the usual melter rule if it's within half range, certainly a good option for delivering a bit of a sting to an enemy tank. And then at base it has 2 storm bolters for a bit of anti-infantry fire, each of which can be swapped out for twin Volkite chargers or heavy flamers. The Volkite chargers will cost you an extra 14 points on top of the 136 for your drill, making it 150. These are heavy 4 weapons with strength 5, AP nothing and 2 damage. They're not too bad to be honest, a little bit better at killing Primaris Marines, a little bit more damaging against anything that relies on an invul save. I'm not sure it's necessarily worth upgrading to them though. The heavy flamers could be a little bit more interesting when they have the flamer rule change that's coming soon. At the moment they're kind of garbage because they can't shoot on the turn when it emerges, but when they have 12-inch range that won't be the case. So you could guarantee a 2d6-inch auto hits with the heavy flamers to cook some infantry. I suspect I'd still personally want to keep it cheap, but it could be an interesting variant that does a bit more damage itself. In any case, when you're shooting enemy units, I think you're going to want to make sure that your drill still has the opportunity to make a charge because its melee threat is really quite strong. It gets 6 attacks hitting on 4s, and it attacks with its termite drill, which is strength times 2, so strength 14, AP-4, and a flat damage of 3. Already very scary and wounding toughness 7 vehicles on 2s, but if you do cause any wounds on an enemy target and it doesn't die, then you get a cascading mortal wound effect. You roll a dice and on a 2+ the target takes a mortal wound. If that's successful then you roll another dice and on a 3+ it takes a mortal wound, getting worse each time until you fail a roll. This leads to some potentially very respectable melee damage indeed. Against say a Space Marine Rhino or another toughness 7 vehicle, you're averaging a very mighty 9 wounds on it. Nowhere near quite as effective against infantry, but it could still run over maybe a few Primaris Marines or something. It's potentially even more of a dangerous threat now that vehicles can fire their ranged weapons in close combat, so your opponent might not even want to tie it up with hordes or anything. In terms of its transport options for the various different races, they all have their own restrictions. For the Space Marines, it can transport up to 12 Marines, no jump packs, no Terminators, no Centurions, no Wolfen, and no Primaris Marines. Honestly, I think its scope might be a bit limited just due to the drop pod being excellent competition. Being able to deep strike turn 1 is really powerful, and they're very cheap as well, so you're really just paying for the deep strike mechanic and not really anything else. One advantage of the drill is that it can bring character support along, so you could have a 10-man Space Marine squad and then maybe a captain or a lieutenant if you really wanted to, so that could be one potential use for it. Potentially you could think about any of the good Space Marine deep strike threats, particularly Grav Devastators, maybe Stern Guard veterans, or perhaps something like Death Company from Blood Angels. All of these really do have their advantages by being able to jump in turn 1 in a drop pod though, which is why I think that the scope might be just a little bit limited. In any case, the Terrax drill can be good for using with certain chapter tactics. Particularly Blood Angels having +1 to the charge is very nice, Iron Hands for a bit of extra durability and slower degrading, Space Wolves for +1 to hit in melee with that drill. All seem like pretty decent choices to me. Over on the AdMech side, it can transport any 12 Forge World or Secutari infantry, though it can't transport Cataphrons of any sort or Belisarius Core. The units that most spring to mind are units of Vanguard, maybe with Plasma Calivers. You could put 2 of them in the same drill, or potentially a unit of Electro Priests. You could either have the Corpuscari for the close range shooting, or potentially the Fulgurites and attempt a 9-inch charge. It's also not a bad choice for the Forge World Secutari either. AdMech armies quite like the opportunity to deep strike certain units like this, and often that can be a good reason to take the Lucius Forge World. It could be quite powerful to have the deep strike option available in either Mars or a Styges list perhaps. Finally, moving over to Chaos, having the option to be able to deep strike their infantry is again very useful. Their restrictions are that you can't take any jump packs, Terminators, or any of the Cult of Destruction models such as Obliterators. Here I think that the opportunities are a bit more ripe. Havocs with chain cannon seem like a really good option, getting close enough to unleash that payload optimally, plus they don't care about moving and shooting. Noise Marines will certainly thank you for being able to get close without getting shot up, and you could maybe play a bit risky with a unit of Khorne Berserkers trying to make a long charge. I think the Death Guard might have one of the better uses of the Terrax drill. It can be one of the best ways to get the Plague Marines in range to deliver their Blight Grenade payload, which can use a bunch of stratagems and character buffs to throw enough mortal wounds around to delete virtually any enemy unit. There's a stratagem to have all of them be able to throw Blight Grenades, there's a stratagem to allow them to throw them at 12-inch range, and there are character buffs that allow you to reroll all wound rolls, get 2 damage with every attack, and also get mortal wounds on the roll of a 6+, which can further go to a 5 if you use Veterans of the Long War. The upshot is that the target dies under a whole barrage of mortal wounds. For the Thousand Suns, it could be one way to deploy Rubric Marines, though they do have some reasonable deployment options of their own, jumping around with the Dark Matter Crystal, or maybe using the Risen Rubricae stratagem. I think their Warp Flamers could be a potentially interesting option if they do get the buff to go to 12-inch range. So in terms of using this guy in-game, first of all, when deciding whether to take it, I would weigh it up against other transport options, or maybe using something like Strategic Reserve, which could potentially be a cheaper way to keep an important unit off the board. If you do decide to take a Terrax drill though, you can always consider deploying it on the board if it makes sense to in any given matchup. If you have a ton of other armoured targets, then you could potentially use it as a big distraction Carnifex that the opponent will probably want to shoot. Maybe trundle it forward into the midfield turn 1 and use it as a battlefield bunker for an assault unit to get out of. It also could be quite good this way if you know that the enemy is coming to you, so it means that you might be able to get a turn 1 charge, or have your unit jump out and safely damage the enemy that way. If you are disembarking after it tunnels up though, I'd bear in mind where your squad's going to want to go. You could maybe set it up a bit diagonally to hopefully allow the Terrax drill a 9-inch charge and also have most of your unit within 12-inch range of the enemy. What's quite helpful is that if the enemy has any intercept type rules, such as Auspex scan or the Eldar stratagem to shoot a unit that's come on from reserve, they'll generally have to target the drill and not the squad inside it, as the drill is the thing that came on from reserve. The squad technically has just got out of a transport vehicle. I would optimally try and have multiple options for a 9-inch charge, so you can maybe shoot your Storm Bolters and Melter Weapons at one unit and then charge something else, as dealing range damage could mean that the opponent just removes models and makes your 9-inch charge into a 10-inch charge or more. If the drill doesn't get in, I'd certainly consider a command reroll, seeing as the difference between getting all that damage off or getting none of it is really quite a big one. From there, the drill's in quite a good place to just be a disruption and distraction threat to the enemy. You can use its durability to tie up enemy units and maybe contest objectives and things, all while dealing a bit of damage with the Melter Cutter and its very scary close combat profile. Overall, I really like the Terrax drill. I think its rules are really quite well written, and it seems like a decently strong option, particularly for Chaos or AdMech, without being too overpowered or anything. I'm sure there's combos and synergies that I've probably missed with this thing, just because its rules are very freeing and it allows you to interact with all sorts of armies in various different ways, so if there's any other combos that you've spotted, please let me know down in the comments. If you've enjoyed the video, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics, where we'll certainly be continuing with datasheet reviews into 9th edition, and I'm looking forward to looking at the new Forge World rules when this new Imperial Armour Compendium eventually comes out. Finally, if you've enjoyed the video and you'd like to help support the channel, I'd just like to mention that I've got an Element Games affiliate link which is down in the video description below. Element Games is a discount retailer within the UK, typically giving 10 to 20% off Warhammer products, and it's a good way to save some money. If you were thinking about ordering in any model soldiers in the near future, then consider giving that link a click and ordering through them. If you do, then a small amount of money goes to help support Auspex Tactics, and it doesn't cost you any more whatsoever when you buy the models. It can just be a way to help support the channel on things that you were already thinking about buying. I do have a very similar Amazon affiliate link for people in the USA and Canada. Again, that one works in pretty much exactly the same way. Click the link, buy anything off Amazon whatsoever, and a small amount goes to help support the channel, not costing you any more while you do so. Can just be another small way to help out if you'd like to. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.